Hello, my dear insightful parents. Today we have a very special guest for our conversation. She is Ekta Verma, and she is a mother, and but she is a lot more than a mother. Uh, she is a senior professional with 25 plus years of experience. She is the founder of Invisible Scars and Porn Viram. She's the executive committee member of the Society of Cyberabad Security Council. She's a team member of Society of Advancement of Human Endeavor. She's a core member of Thai Women Hyderabad and core member of TEDx Hyderabad. So welcome, Ekta, to this conversation with us. Thank you so much for sparing your time and shed some light about it. Okay, now tell
Thank you.
us about this website or this invisiblescars.in and how did it come about? How did you get into this? What drove you or what inspired you to start something like this?
This is when I had decided to take a bit of a career break in my life. But I was never really the sitting down types. I couldn't really pass a day without doing something. So this was something that I was very domestic abuse was something which I was very passionate about. And just to put it in context, Invisible Scars is a support group, and we help domestic abuse victims across ages and across genders. I came into this by not by chance. Like I said, I have grown up in a very conservative family. So my immediate family was extremely broad-minded, but our entire relative circle, and we live in a very small closed community. So extremely conventional, and in such a family, abuse is something which happens years over years, but it's never recognized, it's never spoken about, it is normalized, it is minimized. There is nothing that highlights the abuse that is going on, and hence it keeps going generation after generation, because abuse is something, once the cycle starts, till someone breaks that cycle, it just continues forever. And so this was my inspiration to get into this. It was very personal, because I had seen everyone around me, including my mother, face this kind of emotional abuse, so to say. And my grandmother was an excellent person, my mother was an excellent person, but somehow of course my grandmother never understood that this was abuse, and neither did we. We kept normalizing it, and my mother always hid it from us. She would not have these discussions with us, because she thought we would start disrespecting our grandmother and things like that. But eventually, when she passed away is when I actually sat and did some thinking about it, only to understand that it would have caused her a lot of psychological distress. And when, of course, we know that any kind of distress can cause physical issues also. And then she was diabetic, and then eventually when she passed away, it was almost like she was very sad, but we were never an aware family in that sense. So this was very, I always used to go back and keep thinking about what would have happened, what could have happened differently. Why was she not able to manage, and what was going on. And that was the time I visited this entire conversation. But I only got a chance to start working on it when I kind of quit my job, and I was kind of spending time at home when I took a career break. So all I did with Invisible Scars was try and create a safe space, because abuse is a very lonely journey, especially in communities or places where it is normalized or minimized. It's an extremely lonely journey, because there's nobody to listen to you, there's nobody to understand what you're going through. And so it was just supposed to be a safe space. We started off with less than 200 members, and today we've grown to become a community of 1800 plus, and our group is a by invite group only. So you cannot search for the group and enter the group. And we have a Facebook group. 2018 we started a similar Facebook group for men as well, because we realized that
Yeah.
it's not only women, it is men also that face this kind of abuse. And in the case of men, they are silenced by their own type, or they're silenced by the family. So this is just Invisible Scars is just supposed to be a very safe space for people to express themselves if they are facing domestic abuse. But then we started getting people asking for help, and so then we started tying up with organizations that could help, legal help, counseling help. And over a period of time, I had to self-educate myself. It wasn't domestic abuse, wasn't what I thought it was. So I really had to do nights and nights of reading, understanding, going through videos, educating myself. I actually took up a post-graduation course in gender, to understand the topic better. And this is how it's been from 2016, a very steep learning curve, so to say, where I have immersed myself completely in order to create a safe space for people who are facing abuse.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for doing that, Ekta. I think this is very much required, especially in our Indian context, because we are very proud of our roots and family traditions and stuff like that. But unfortunately, a lot of these traditions, uh, these abuse get masked under traditions and values and setups and all. Uh, so, like you said, it is normalized
Correct.
by the family, by everybody else. And I think it is time that somebody like, I'm so glad that somebody like you has taken up this as an issue. And unfortunately, a lot of poor women don't even think of it as an issue. They just
Right.
think that, okay, that is the way, that is who I'm supposed to be, that is how I'm supposed to be serving and things like that. So I'm so happy to hear this from you.
Actually,
Now,
even men do the same thing, because the same expectation burdens are placed on men as well. So you have to be the bread earner, you have to be the macho man, and so you're not allowed to feel what you're feeling. You're not allowed to express yourself the way you want to. I mean, who says that the man has to? Where is it written? Which law says that the man has to earn and be the breadwinner? I mean, if he's happy being at home and the woman goes out and it becomes a breadwinner, what's wrong in that? But we have kind of created these, you can do this and you can do that, so much that men are equally suffocated. I would not say that men are any less suffocated. It's just that maybe because it's a patriarchal culture, they express themselves more in different ways, and women are less able to express themselves. But I believe that men are equally
absolutely, that's you're so right about this being something that is gender neutral, and it
yes.
can abuse is abuse. Now, I want to ask you or understand a little more about abuse. Okay, now traditionally, uh, even now, a lot of people understand abuse only as a physical abuse or a sexual abuse. Okay, now abuse. What do you term as an abuse? What would you consider as an abuse?
Okay. So currently, when we talk about domestic abuse or domestic violence, a lot of people call it domestic violence. I prefer calling it domestic abuse. Even if you do a Google search of the word domestic violence, you will see that it's typically a man hitting a woman.
Hmm.
Pictures on Google,
Yes.
right? No, it's a very narrow definition. It is not the right definition. Domestic abuse can happen in any domestic relationship. It can happen from any age to any age. It can happen across any gender. It is just the abuse that happens in a domestic setup. It is that simple. And domestic abuse, I mean, there are multiple classifications, but I kind of classify it broadly in 5 categories. One is physical abuse, which is physical violence, which is beating, hitting, pushing, burning, all of those physically violent things. Then the second is emotional abuse. Emotional, psychological, verbal kind of all fall in the same gamut. So verbal is when you are saying nasty things to someone to break them down. Psychological is when you're saying something to make them look crazy. And emotional is when you're kind of hurting their emotions. So they kind of fall in the same category: emotional, verbal, and psychological. Then there's economic abuse, where you use money as a means to gain power in a relationship. And then we have sexual abuse, of course. And we have digital abuse. Now digital abuse is now a new form of abuse, and it actually happens in homes. There are very little conversations about the digital abuse happening within homes. And its impact is very, very devastating. One of the things about abuse that is very significant is abuse is about power. It happens in a relationship where there is unequal distribution of power. So it could be between a parent and a child. It could be between a spousal relationship. It could be an in-law relationship. It could be a sibling relationship. But the significant thing to note is that one person in that relationship will hold more power than the other person.
So this digital abuse is something that I'm actually hearing for the first time. So could you share something more about it? What exactly do you consider as digital abuse?
Correct. So I think about a couple of years back, maybe 2 or 3 years back, I'm not exactly sure. There was an incident that happened in Hyderabad, where this newly married couple, so the newly married couple, the husband got arrested. The reason he got arrested was because from the day he had married, he used to actually live stream his intimate moments with his wife on Facebook. This is a relationship where you're supposed to be safe with the person that you are, and that's the reason, there is that barrier gets broken. And if you live stream your intimate moments, and I think you can Google this, it's very easy to find the news report. So incidents like this, where any electronic medium is used to hurt or harm, where a video is taken, or where an audio clip is used, or where any digital medium is used to exert power in a domestic relationship. It could be a child also. You could probably make a video of a child and then just blackmail the child thereafter. And we have excluded child sexual abuse or child abuse, but if 94% of child abuse cases are happening by people within their homes or people that they know,
Yes.
and largely homes, then it means that all of it falls under the purview of domestic abuse. So, I don't think 94% is people within the home, but it's definitely people we know. And I'm assuming a large percentage will be that of people within homes. So why are we not having those conversations at all? So digital abuse, is, and I'm sorry, I, kind of went to child sexual abuse, but
No.
digital
All the
abuse.
important topics.
Correct. But digital abuse is basically the use of any technology medium to exert power over another person and get them to, feel bad or, unhappy, or hurt them or harm them or humiliate them. Any of those things.
Okay, thank you. There are many women and men also who stay in abusive relationship because they believe that it is the right thing to do for their children. Okay, what do you
Right.
have to say about it?
Right. So the first thing that I will say about this is there is one aspect of being with the children. There is a whole lot of judgment around whether it was a love marriage or an arranged marriage. So a lot of survivors who reach out to me, they will tell me mine was a love marriage, as if it's a crime that I got married to someone I loved or I liked at that point of time, and they turned out to be abusive, and so that is a huge fault. So this is one of the things that I would completely like people to stop saying. There is no guarantee that an arranged marriage will be non-abusive, and there is no guarantee that a love marriage will be abusive. So I think we should stop this whole love marriage, arranged marriage nonsense completely. So you asked about impact on a child. what typically happens is parents think that we are living together for the sake of the child, and the child will get a stable home and will have two parents, but that is not actually true. The truth is that children who watch abuse growing up, or continue to watch abuse, become psychologically disturbed individuals, because either they tend to believe that abuse is the right way to live life, or they tend to believe that it's okay to be abused. So usually what happens is such kids grow up to have their own relationship issues when they are adults, and sometimes the abuse starts to manifest when they are young. If it is violence, children are known to develop PTSD, which is post traumatic stress disorder. If there's a lot of violence at home, if it is a lot of emotional abuse, you would see that such children, when they grow up to be adults, they don't really become very nice adults, or they need to seek help all the time. They're either very timid or they're very aggressive. They will be all over the place. And so I think one of the reasons to leave an abusive relationship is to give your child a healthy atmosphere. And so if there is abuse, it is so important to walk out of that relationship, because eventually what you're doing is you're just giving your child a toxic environment, and you're raising a child in that toxic environment 24/7, and you are expecting that the child will come out with flying colors, and that is not going to happen. There is definitely going to be issues that the child will face. There is no two ways about it. So one of the most important reasons to leave an abusive relationship is the children.
Right. Thank you so much. And people don't unfortunately realize that they only think with respect to having a family and both the parents there. And there have been so many cases where children have been completely affected because of sparring parents. They
Right.
constantly shouting, and they just and they. I've heard of cases when children have gone and told the parents that, why don't you people separate?
Correct. Correct.
Because they
Correct.
can't stand. I mean, the children are quite intuitive. They can see that it's not working, and they're just trying to
Correct.
stay together for their sake. He said, I've
Correct.
had cases where children come and say, okay, I'll be fine, I'll be happier if you both are individually happy instead
Correct.
of you staying together and fighting.
So recently, someone reached out to me. She's in her late 50s. And she said, you know what, I'm in a lot of trouble. So when I spoke to her, I realized that, she was married for many, many years, and she lived through an abusive relationship for her children, right? And then her daughter grew up to start having relationship issues, and then her daughter was just so angry with her mother. She said, I'm having relationship issues because you were not a good mother, you could never take a stand for yourself, and so I'm unable to take a stand. And her son, who was again very angry and aggressive person, just walked out of the house. He said, I'm so unhappy around you. And she was very disheartened, and it was so heartbreaking to see that she had given up her whole life for these two kids, and the kids they didn't understand that nay, it's not their fault at all.
True,
They had their own issues, and they were blaming their mother for not being able to take a stand.
true, true. Now, tell me one thing. What, according to you, should a person in an abusive situation do? I mean, that's one thing. Second part is, how long when do you realize, if I'm in a relationship, when do I realize that I'm in an abusive relationship? Because there are, even in great relationship, we have disagreements.
Right.
At times there are heated arguments and stuff like that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So when do you consider it as an abusive? When should I have the red flag saying that, okay, this is an abusive?
Correct. One of the things that is very important to understand is that there is a lot of difference between conflict and abuse,
Hmm.
right? Conflict is not an issue of power, it's a difference in viewpoints,
Right.
whereas abuse is an issue of power. Like I said, it's something to do with power dynamics. One person will have more power over the other person. Now, a conflict can be resolved. right? You will fight, you will scream with at each other, you will fight with each other, but eventually you will sit down together, have a cup of tea, resolve it, laugh at it, maybe, get angry again, but eventually it cools down, because the intent is not to hurt or humiliate. It was just a difference of viewpoints, and you both expressed yourself very strongly, and that's how it is, right? But when it comes to abuse, that is not how it is. In an abusive relationship, one ends up feeling completely themselves. Either they start to lose on their sleep, or they start having self-esteem issues, or they start having extreme anxiety. They are always walking on eggshells, is the expression we use in abusive language, which means that they are forever scared of getting into any kind of situation. So the result of this is that they stop expressing themselves, because in unlike a conflict where you express yourself and the other person hears you and you hear out the other person, and then eventually you work out something, this is a non-resolvable situation. So one person then starts to shut down, and one person starts to feel extremely terrible about themselves, and that is when it is abuse. And definitely one person in the relationship has more power, so that is when it is actually abuse.
So if I say that, okay, if you are constantly fearful about
Yes,
what may happen, and you're constantly second guessing and thinking whether this is the right thing to do, this is not the right thing to do,
right.
on a daily basis,
Yes, yes.
that would that be an indicator that you're in an abusive relationship?
Absolutely, that's an indicator. Also, abuse follows a pattern. Conflict does not follow a pattern. You have a conflict over an issue, it ends there. Maybe then you have another conflict over another issue. It doesn't follow a pattern. Now, there is something which we know as cycle of abuse, and that is again reinforcement of the same pattern. So, the abuse situation happens, then the person, kind of gets into that whole apology phase. Then when that whole apology phase happens, this other person tries to pacify the person, and then goes back to the same. And so this keeps going on in a cycle. And so abuse, the very fundamental thing to understand is that abuse follows a pattern, and if that pattern is continuously repeated over a period of time, then you do know that it's abuse.
Okay. Now, you said, and it is true, that when a person is being abused, the self-concept, self-worth, everything goes extremely low. And I think it'll be very difficult for somebody to reach out for help, for the simple fact that, especially an organization, because nobody talks about abuse in the first place. Second, they don't know what would be the next action. Let's say if I am being
Yeah.
abused and I'm scared that if I reach out to you, will you come into my home and talk to my spouse? Will you take police action? So there's a lot of fears associated with
Correct.
reaching out for help. So how can you assure these people that just they should reach out, and nothing will happen which they don't want to happen, kind of stuff?
Correct. I will answer that question by starting off by saying that if you are facing physical violence, we always tell you to reach out to the police. There is just no other way around it. Either you reach out to the police, or you go to court. You hire a lawyer, you go to court, you file for protection orders. But when it's physical violence, we say there's no compromise. You should definitely report it. Now, coming to the other forms of abuse, largely emotional abuse. First of all, emotional abuse is very, very difficult to pin down. So how do you understand that it's emotional abuse? Not everyone has the same level of understanding. So there are a lot of checklists, and we have one on the Invisible Scars website as well, where you can kind of answer a few questions that tells you, oh, okay, I may be in an emotionally abusive relationship. Now, emotional abuse is something where sometimes the abuser also doesn't know that this is what I'm doing. So in cases of emotional abuse, we say that if you don't want to separate, because in cases of emotional abuse, a spouse comes and says, no, 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 I don't want to separate. Is there a way we can work around this? Can you tell my spouse that this is what they are doing? And so what we say is you start counseling, right? If your spouse is not willing to go with you, that's okay, because if you're going to tell someone, hey, you know what, you're abusing me, they're not going to be open to the idea of counseling. So what you should do is you should start counseling for yourself. Now, counseling essentially builds up objectivity in a person. It builds up their self-esteem. It enables them to understand what's good and what's not good for them. And so it helps them take more informed decisions, is what counseling does for a domestic abuse survivor. And now when you take counseling, it is possible that you say, hey, look, I went for counseling. This really helped me. Do you think you would like to come along? I really want to work out our issues. And so if you can get yourselves to a counselor without being patronizing to the other person, then it really works. But in cases where the emotional abuse is very, very severe, now we have several. So this is not only spousal emotional abuse. Now, if it is emotional abuse from parents, so how do you handle it? So when it is emotional abuse from parents, when you are a minor, there really isn't any other way but to talk to people about it. You can look for someone in the family, maybe a grandparent or a trusted person, to say that this is what is happening. And if you are being abused by a parent, most likely it is not both the parents. It may be one parent. So you could definitely talk to it. But if you're an adult, I've seen a lot of 25, 30-year-old people living with abusive parents. So what we tell them is that, why don't you take a place close to your parents so that you're not worried about their safety and security, because, we have this whole duty towards parents. But start living an independent life, start taking your own decisions. Work on yourself. And so I think the gist of all of this is that, start off with counseling if you don't understand what to do. That's the most basic type of help that you can get yourself. Counseling is an investment on yourself. It will help you build up your self-esteem. It will help you build up objectivity. It will help you in the long term. And it is not an easy process. So it is not like you go for counseling and they're going to wave a magic wand. It's a process. So you will have to be there. Like you might have to go through counseling for 3 months, 6 months, a year. We don't know what damage has been caused and what it will take. But counseling is one of the things. But in case of physical violence, we are very, very clear that just go to the police. There is no other way to report it. And if you don't know what you're going through, reach out to someone, talk to someone. There are so many wonderful domestic abuse professionals out there. They'll guide you. There is so much of information. I mean, a simple way to do it is, if they are feeling uncomfortable or uneasy in a relationship and you feel that something's not right, just Google what you're feeling. The likelihood is you will get 20 articles that will tell you what you're feeling. For those who think they are facing emotional abuse, you can look up our 30 question checklist. If you say yes to 5 or more of them, you're definitely in an abusive relationship. And what you can do in such cases is take charge of what your life is. I always talk about the sphere of influence thing. So I say, my innermost sphere of influence is myself. The ring outside of that is that where my spouse and my children are. And the circle outside of that is where my relatives, my family members are. In the ring outside of that is my friends and acquaintances. So if I try to change myself, I cover shorter distance. And as I go outside towards these concentric circles, I'm covering more distance. So if I'm saying that I'm going to be leaving my sphere of influence and trying to be changing the abuser, that doesn't work. Right? Because I'm moving out. My abuser could be my spouse, could be my parents, could be in-laws, relatives, could be anybody. So the first most critical thing to understand is that you must work on changing yourself, or you must work on building yourself up. So counseling is the only thing and the only way to go.
Okay, now let me understand this in a step-by-step way. Okay, it's because if there are a lot of parents who would be watching this, and I'm sure a lot of people would get benefited if I take it. Let's say I come to invisiblescars.in website and I did the questionnaire, and I realized that I am in an abusive relationship.
Right.
Okay. Now,
Right.
maybe I didn't even realize that I was in an abusive relationship, but now I
Absolutely.
realize. Okay. Now, what is the step that I need to do? I do not know any counselors, and I don't know whom to reach out to. Can I reach out directly to you? Will it remain confidential? Because I don't want anybody else coming to know about my domestic issues.
Correct. Correct. So the first thing that I want to say is that if you reach out to us, we are a support group. That is what we do. We help you with whatever resources you require. The way we work at Invisible Scars is we ask the person, what is it you want? Okay, so today you've realized that you're facing abuse. What is going on in your mind? What are you thinking? What is it you want? And we always work on what that survivor wants. We never prescribe. We are not prescriptive in nature.
Right.
And so you can always reach out to us for connects. I get calls from all over the country. People reach out to me from all over the country. I have written to so many senior police officials, to all state women commissions. I've written emails. If you're not comfortable reporting, if you feel that reporting is required, or if you feel that you need a good lawyer or someone, reach out to us. We will try and manage to get you the right kind of help. I don't promise that we have all the resources with us, but we will definitely try and get you some kind of help. We also have two support groups on Facebook. One is for men, like I said, exclusively for men, and one is for women. You can join, and anonymity is most critical to us, because that is the basis on which we are growing, because our members know, or people who connect to us, they know that we will not compromise on their anonymity. So the compromise on the anonymity doesn't mean that when we connect you to a professional, we will not mention your name or your phone number. It just means that we will never talk about you in a public forum.
True.
And that is the most essential part of being anonymous, and we don't share your details with anyone else unless it is a professional who's going to provide you any services, that too with your consent. So the way we tell people is just drop us an email. When you go to Invisible Scars website, our email is there. Just drop us an email, and we will respond to you with whatever is needed. Or you can call me. My number is also there on the website. We'll get you whatever help you need. And the first step, I always said, is think of yourself first. If you're going through something, think of how you can. I mean, even when you're in an airplane, they tell you put your oxygen mask before you help others.
True.
So if you are not in a psychologically good condition, and you are probably trying to get help for your children, or you're trying to send your spouse for counseling, that may not work. You need to help yourself first, work on yourself, and then look at how things pan out.
Okay, thank you. I mean, that's the way you are functioning, the way the website is operating. Is I think that's really commendable, really, because I felt as a normal human being, these would be some of my concerns if I realize that I'm in an abusive relationship, because I have a family, I have a daughter, and yes, I want to get out of the situation, but at the same time, I don't want to kind of completely destroy the whole thing, and I don't want my other people coming and giving me advice about
Correct,
what I
correct,
should be doing and I'm thinking wrong and all that kind of
right,
stuff. Okay, so I think
right.
that's really, really commendable. So another question that I have for you is that it is said that uh, it is not just the person who commits a crime. If somebody is watching it and not reporting it, that's even bigger one, right? Because he's encouraging that to happen. And I think when it comes to domestic abuse, many times I've seen that the people close to them, they can see that abuse is happening sometimes, but the person inside who is going through it, they are so immune to it, that's normalized so much that they don't realize that they're in an abusive relationship. So what is your general advice to society? How can we as people help others who are going through any kind of abuse?
I'm so glad you asked that question. That is the most critical question. Now, before I answer this question, one of the things I would like to say is domestic abuse is not a family conflict. It is not ghar ka mamla. It is a crime. It is a violation of someone's human rights. So it is not something, अरे how can I interfere, ये तो किसी के घर का मामला है. No, not at all. You can interfere. Now you asked me, if you don't report it, are you party to the crime? So in cases of child sexual abuse, definitely, if you don't report it, you are party to the crime, and that is not permitted by law. So if you do know of something happening to a child, it is mandatory that you report it to the child helpline. That's the first thing. Now coming to adult relationships, if you know that abuse is happening in a relationship, right, first of all, you should never ever give advice. The reason is the reason is you're not first of all, you're not a professional. The second thing is, my advice comes from my sense of reality. It may or may not be applicable to you at all. And so what will happen with advice is that I will give you advice which may actually end up harming you, right? True. So what you should do is, if you really want to help someone, step in and help them in a manner where you understand what they need. So don't give them conditions that I will help you if you do this, or I will help you if you talk like this, or I will help you if you go here. No, please don't do that. And if you're not able to understand, reach out to a relevant NGO. There are hundreds of NGOs. There is the police. It's not like if you reach out to a police station, the police will come and tell you, no, we can't talk about it. No. So there is a lot of negative stereotype about the police, and the police is very helpful, in many cases, especially where there is violence. But you need to have a conversation with them. You need to tell them this is what's happening. So if you are going to be a bystander, and if you are going to be intervening, then you have to know that either you go all the way, or you give it to someone who can go all the way. And you have to ask the survivor, what is it they want? They may not want what you think is necessary for them. They may want something else. They may have their own fears. So help them work around the fears. There is no prescriptive help ever given to anyone. It has to be with their, sometimes I do get angry when a lot of survivors call me and they say, nahi, aisa nahi ho sakta. But then it's not my place to tell them what to do. It is my place to show them the way, and then they can choose to go on that way or not. But don't be a mute bystander. If you are being a mute bystander, you are morally, responsible for that happening, right? So if someone is getting abused and you are watching and you're not saying anything, thinking ye to unke ghar ka mamla hai, then you're morally responsible, right? So it is not always about the obligation by law. There is a certain moral obligation that we as a community or we as bystanders have for people. And the best thing is, if you don't understand, just simply report, go to an NGO, report it to the police, do all of those things. Just don't stay quiet, but make sure you have the survivor's consent before you do any of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the first steps is for making the person understand that they're getting abused. Like we were discussing, they get so normalized about it. And I think I just came to my mind that one of the best ways would be to, ask them to come to the invisiblescars.in and take that questionnaire. If I tell something, it is my opinion. If I can't tell somebody that you are being abused, when they realize that, okay, all these things are happening, and maybe I'm in an abusive relation, and that could be a great start. And I think that questionnaire will help a lot of people identify their relationships.
Correct. The questionnaire is only a very small part of our whole ecosystem. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles, videos, blogs on abuse. Anything that you feel, just Google a symptom, and you will get to know whether it is abuse or not, or you will get to read about alternates. And the more you read, you will understand. Invisible Scars is just a very small initiative in the whole larger scheme of things. But please don't sit quietly. If you identified that there is a problem somewhere, please try and understand what it is at least.
All right. Okay, Ekta, there is one issue that I want to discuss with you. I've seen unfortunate cases where when a child is born, becomes a child, could be a child with a special need, and a lot of blame goes on the mother. That it's because of your genes, it's because of, I mean, worst case, it is because of your karma, or you gave birth to this child, and that because you gave birth, there is something wrong with you. And to many, unfortunately, women, mothers blame themselves, and they live in a lot of desperation. What do you have to say about that?
Okay, so the biological process of creating a child is very simple. The sperms come from a man and the eggs come from a woman. So it cannot be someone's, background, or someone's, genes, or someone's karma that creates a child with special needs, right? A
Right.
child with special needs is not a curse. That is the whole point to understand. We are so hung up on stereotypes about how children should be, is that instead of nurturing a child with special needs, we actually end up blaming the mother and saying that this is because of you. So the first thing that this kind of behavior points to is the lack of information about special needs. If you have a special needs child, if you love the child is going to love you back. It is a human being. It is not an object that you can blame that, you got a bed from your parents house and now that bed is creaking. It is not like that. It's a human being. So one of the things that we have seen, that this is very, very common, and like you said, yes, women also blame themselves. So we attribute all of this to lack of knowledge. Not knowing what your child is going through is criminal. You should at least attempt to find out what the child is going through, and how you are going to raise the child. There are ways, and I have personally seen that there are so many special needs children who are extremely wonderful, and they actually end up being quite successful. It's not that they're not successful, but they may not be in the worldly sense of things. But blaming someone for having a special needs child, or abusing someone because of that, or getting angry at that person. So the biological process simply says that both of you are part of it. So if one person is to blame, then you are to blame as much. And what happens when you start pointing fingers is the end result is the child suffers in the whole process. And so we should, women should completely, especially women, because a lot of this is told to women, should completely stand up and say, no, this is not because of me. This is unfortunate, but it's not because of me. And then take care of the child, go to a counselor, seek help, take care of the child in the manner that you're supposed to.
So first, the women should know that it is not their fault.
Not
It
their
is
fault.
not because of
Yes.
anything that they have done. So they should be very clear about that, and then they should take the next step
Correct.
towards
Correct.
this. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now, coming to our role as parents, uh, how important it is that to be a role model for our children and show them to stand up for their rights. I mean, you have two wonderful girls. One is, I mean, both of them are teenagers now. And how do you teach your children to stand up for their rights?
Uh, Children only learn by watching. They don't
True.
learn by what you tell them. So no matter what you tell them, they will watch and they will learn what you do. So you have to set that example for them. There is no other way on earth that I have seen a child learning. Whatever you do, your actions are what they absorb, and that is what they pick up, and that is what they tend to do. That is why a lot of us are versions of our parents. A lot of us
Mhm.
come out, and when we grow a little older, we say, oh, my dad also used to do this, or my mom also used to do this, and I'm a certain version of my parent, right? Because you have watched them unconsciously, that is what you pick up. Consciously, that is what you pick up. So if you are saying something and doing something else, they are going to pick up what you are doing, not what you are saying. So you have to be very, very careful that you are setting the right example by doing the right thing yourself. So if you want them to stand up for yourself, you've got to stand up for yourself to set that example. If you want them to be ethical and honest, then you've got to be ethical and honest. If you want them to have a certain thought process, then you've got to build that thought process in your own self, because whatever you do, they're just going to replicate what they see you doing.
Yeah. So thank you so much for this. I mean, I think this is a very, very important topic. And I just want to ask you, what is your final message to everyone? So, they need to know that it is not their fault. A lot of times we end up blaming ourselves. "Maine kuch kiya hoga galat. That's why I'm going through this." So it is all right to reach out for help and take that action, because life is supposed to be enjoyable, beautiful, and there's no reason for anyone to suffer at the hands of anybody else. Yeah. So, what is your message for everybody?
So it's a slightly complicated answer that I'm going to give to that. But abuse basically is a result or an outcome of three major factors. One could be biological factors, one could be psychological factors, and the third is social factors. So when we talk about biological factors, we are talking largely about genetics and
Hmm.
biological conditions. When we are talking about psychological factors, we are talking about it could be a personality disorder, it could be a psychological condition that this person has, and the third is the social factor. Social factor is largely the environment you have grown up with. So it is easier to work on factors like biological factors and psychological factors through counseling. Sorry, not biological, sorry, social factors and
Hmm.
psychological factors sometimes, right? So it is important to know, and the reason I'm going into that depth and telling you that is that it is important to know that if an abuser is abusing you, it is a result of their shortcomings, not yours. So what
True.
they are doing is they are simply reflecting that upon you. Now, if someone has a genetic problem, there's nothing you can do about it. It's hereditary,
Hmm.
right? If someone has a psychological problem, there's nothing you can do about it, right? And if someone has been raised in an environment where they're constantly conditioned, there's really nothing you can do about it, right? They have to take charge and they have to work on their behavior, or they have to work on their psyche. It's not you that has to do it. So one of the things that is very important to know is that abuser behavior can never be your fault. It is always the fault of the abuser. And probably that is what I was arriving at, which is why I wanted people to understand that when an abuser behaves in a certain manner, it is not an indication of the person you are. So you should never let it get to you. You should understand that abuse is never the survivor's fault. It is always important to know that and keep that in mind. And so if you are facing abuse, you when you think it's your fault, you're guilty. You try and get help with guilt in your mind, and then that really doesn't work. And when you know that it's not your fault and you step out there to get help, you are more open to receiving the help that people are giving you, and more people are open to helping you. And trust me, from what I have seen, there are enough people who are willing to go out there and help another person. All you need to do is ask. So I think that is my larger message to everyone, is that don't blame yourself, and do fight. Like I said in my earlier video also, stereotypes is very important. I mean, in our mind, our stereotype of the law is that everybody is a cheat, or every lawyer is out there to fleece me. That is not true. Our stereotypes are that police is very corrupt. That is not true. So enough people are getting help from the systems that are established in place, and that is why we have these systems in place. And so um, please break out of your own stereotypes. Don't live in your own mind, and ask people for help, and be open to them when they are trying to help you out. And despite which, it could end up in the fact that you don't get the required help. But a lot of it is also self-esteem related. So work on your self-esteem. Counseling, like I said earlier also, counseling is very critical. So self-help first, reaching out to others secondary, and knowing that it is not your fault. I think these are largely the three things I would like to say.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this, Ekta. And I'm so glad we had this conversation. And I hope this video reaches maximum number of people, because having a website is one thing, but
Right.
putting a face to the whole process, uh, listening to you, hearing your thought process, and the calm, you have a calming effect, when you just have a
Thank you.
conversation, and that's going to help a lot of people maybe get out of the trouble that they are in. So thank you so much for this,
Thank you.
sparing your time and
So
sharing
Bimal,
out.
just before we end, I would like to say that we have a YouTube channel. It's not,
Oh,
we don't have multiple videos, but we've talked about healthy and unhealthy relationships and abusive relationships. So if you
lovely.
have the time, do visit and watch those videos. Our channel is Invisible Scars on
Oh,
YouTube. But just go, there are 3 or 4 videos, and we've also spoken about why counseling is important. So we've got more into in depth how men face abuse, all of those things we have covered. So do watch our videos, because you might get some help through it. If you know what a healthy relationship looks like, it will immediately help you in identifying what an unhealthy relationship looks like and what an abusive relationship looks like. So do watch
absolutely. Definitely.
our videos.
Definitely. We'll definitely do that. So thank you so much once again, Ekta. It's
Thank
been
you
a
so much.
pleasure. It's been a privilege
Same,
having.
same here. I wish you guys all the best. I know you're doing some wonderful work, and I've known Uma, so I know that she's a fabulous person. So thank you for the opportunity that you guys have given me today.
Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you so much. Bye.